So, welcome to another episode of Black Valley. But Brother Long here, coming from Rwanda, and we just wanted to just give a recap of everything we've gone through in the past few episodes. So, the first thing we went over was a persona, and the purpose of the persona was to make sure that you got intimately familiar with your customers, and we did that by going through a persona template. And in the persona template, you look at, hey, what are the characteristics of a typical customer that you would actually encounter? What are their problems that they go through? What are their pain points? What do they value? Because by deeply understanding those characteristics, where do they shop? What do they look at? How do they get their news? You can actually figure out how to find more customers like them. And you can also figure out, how do I tailor my product, tailor my service to actually meet their needs and the needs of those like them. And that's how you can really grow your market, right? You can find more customers.
Can you say a bit about what a pain point is?
Yeah, so a pain point is something that is an impediment or an obstacle for a customer to actually achieve whatever goal they're trying to achieve. So as they go about trying to achieve their goal, sometimes there's difficulties, there's challenges that don't make it easy. And those are the items that we really want to make note of, because by making note of, if we can figure out how to tailor our product, our service to make it easier for them to obtain what they want, then it's a win-win for both parties. You'll get more customers, they'll see more value in the product or service, but you're also going to attract more customers. People that have their pains taken care of are so excited about it that they tell everyone they know. So you'll get more referrals by attacking these pain points. So again, we wanted to cover in the persona problems they encounter, the value they want to achieve, their pain points, and what are some things we call delighters, things that they really love about your product and service. Because things that delight them, they'll also delight people like them, other customers. So you want to do more of it, and that's how you get more money. So
Makes sense.
we went over personas first, and we delve deep into what are our what are our typical customers like. Then we did another exercise in episode 2. In episode 2, we went over what we call the ideal customer profile. So instead of looking at a typical customer, typically one that we already have in a persona, we said, hey, let's think about the perfect customer, the one that we love to work with, the one that gives us the most amount of money, the one that really loves our product or service. Let's look at an ideal customer, ones that we would like to have. And once we could figure out, here's what that ideal customer is, now when we communicate to other people, we can tell them, well, here's the type of customer I'm looking for. Find me someone like this person with these characteristics. And that's how you get the huge referrals from other people. Again, you can tailor your product or service toward them also. But most often, for your ideal customer profile, they already love your product or service. And that's what makes them ideal. The huge benefit is being able to communicate succinctly, here's the type of customer I'm looking for. And once I can tell other people in my network, because usually, your boys, they want to help you out. So if you tell them what you're looking for and they find somebody that meets those characteristics, they'll happily refer them. So taking the time to do the ideal customer profile gives you that ability to be able to communicate, here's what I'm looking for in reference to customers to everyone in your network. And that way they can help be extra free salespeople for you. They can actually find other people that meet those characteristics and link you two up so that you can expand your customer base. So that's the ideal customer profile. In episode 3, we took this a step further. Now we went over a basic persona, your typical customer. We went over the ideal customer profile. Then we went and we started doing buyer profiles. And in these buyer profiles, instead of actually looking at the most popular, a typical customer, and instead of looking at the ideal customer, we started saying, let's do a profile of other customers that we actually have, that we could actually serve. And that way, when we think about these other customers, they may not be the ideal one, but we got to make money. So we can't always have the ideal one, right? We have to take care and service the people who come our way. Here are these other customers that are out there, and let's look at the characteristics that they have. Let's look at their wants, their needs, what they value, so I can tailor what I deliver and make sure that they're happy with it, that they find it valuable. And that's the power of that buyer profile. So
And
now,
can, can you say a bit about the importance of how the first three topics were all about the customer before we even got into anything else?
absolutely. I have a firm belief, and it's a belief backed up by experience, that you need to be insanely focused on the customer. Lots of people make the mistake of being so into themselves and so into whatever passion they have that they forget about the customer. And I have this opposite philosophy. I believe that if you forget yourself and focus on what customers want, focus on what they need, then you'll have the ability to be able to service them better, tailor your product or service to what they need, and that'll unleash either greater profits from that one customer and or a new opportunity, new profits from customers like them. But I firmly believe you have to study the customers to figure out what the market is for your product or service and how to change it. Most often, if you had the perfect product that everyone loved, you would be rich. So you wouldn't need to do anything else. But if you're not rich, if your product isn't flying off the shelf, then there's some opportunity for you to tailor your product or service to do something that's a little bit more valuable in the marketplace. The only way you're going to find out what's more valuable in the marketplace is by studying the people that value it, the customers, right? So you do this work to really study your customers and potential customers, figure out what they value, what they love, what they like, get from them how you should change your product. 'Cause again, you're going to be biased. You think that your product or service is great, which is why you created it, and you think it's the right thing. But if it's not flying off the shelf, it's lacking in some aspect. Otherwise, more people will buy it. And the only way to figure it out is to really talk to the buyers, study, here are the things that they care about, the things that they like. So, again, that insane focus on the customer so you can figure out what you need to do to modify your product or service so that it does fly off the shelf, so it is more appealing to your customer base. This is a humbling process. And the reason I say it's humbling is because often we put out a product or service that we believe in and we love it and we think it's the right thing, right? And
Yeah.
actually, I've talked to a lot of people as a consultant, and lots of times the business owner they get upset at customers for not loving their product as much as they do. It's like, this is great. What's wrong with you? And again, it's humbling because we have to come to the realization just because you think it's great doesn't mean that people in the marketplace think it's great. And if you want other people to buy it, you have to tailor it. You have to change it to give people what they want, not necessarily concentrate on what you want to give. But by the way, as I talk about this with clients, normally take pause with it and they look at their relationships. It's like, yeah, this works for relationships too. But again, like in the business world, if you really want customers that really love your product or service, you have to tailor it. You have to change your product or service to what they consider valuable because people are spending money on something. They have goals and they spend their money on something. We're in a consumer driven society. What we want to figure out is what will make them spend the money on you and not on someone else. And so you have to study the customers, ask them, hey, customers or potential customers, what would make you pick me and my product and my service over these other alternatives in the market? Because they know the answer because they're making the choice. What we want to
how
do
how
is
do,
ask them.
how does this tie into the product owner meeting the stakeholders?
So the product owner, when they meet the stakeholders, their main job should be to do research. And everything we've talked about, the personas, the ideal customer profile, the buyer personas, the buyer profiles, these are tools that the product owner is using to study the customers so they know how to make educated guesses to get feedback about what customers consider to be valuable. So these are tools. A product owner should do this on their own time. They should start it before they actually start interacting with customers, and then they should flush it out and update it as they continuously get more information, get more feedback from their customers or
And
potential.
how should that influence the product backlog?
So when I figure out what customers consider valuable, what I should do is compare here's what I'm delivering, here's my product or service, to here's what I'm hearing from my customers or potential customers about what they consider most valuable, what they would pay more money for, but more than would like to see. And usually there's a gap between where my product or service is right now and what my customers say they would pay more money for, or I get more customers to buy that product or service. And so the backlog should be a description of the work necessary to bridge the gap between my current state of product or service and what my customers say they want in the future, right? And so you made the comment earlier, it was off camera, but earlier, and how this process is scientific, and it is. It's methodical, and
Yes.
like when I break it down this way, most of my clients tell me how, wow, it's amazing that you had to tell me this because it seems so obvious after you said it. And it kind of is a logical process of, hey, I if I come to the inevitable conclusion that my product or service is lacking because I'm not making as much money as I want, then there has to be somewhere to change it. So how do I figure out how to change it? Well, I should ask the people that know, the people that are spending the money, the customers, because they know what they're willing to spend money on. So I should ask them, hey, what would you spend more money on? Right? What do people like you? Like, how do I get more of you? Right? Again, and we all did this when we were younger, especially the brothers, right? You you find a young lady and you talk to her and to try to see if she's single, and and she's fine, and you're like, hey, you know what? You find out she's not single, but you're like, hey, you know what? You find women that they tend to flock together. So let me go ask you, where do I find more like you? And maybe I'll find one that is single, right? So we all did this research in the other parts of our life. And what I'm doing is saying, hey, let's apply that same philosophy to the business world, right? Go
Yeah.
talk to customers, talk to people that like our product, like our service, have that need, and then ask them, hey, where do I find more of you? Right? And they'll if they like your product or service, they like you, they'll tell you, and that's how you can gather more and more customers. Right? Now, here's the fun part of this. So, again, we gave a recap of what we've done so far. The natural extension to this is I get more information about what customers want. And I develop what I call a hypothesis, a customer hypothesis. And the customer hypothesis, it actually takes the information in and it forms a conclusion. I talk to my customers. I think that they want this thing that's valuable. I think about what can I do to change my product or service to make it more valuable, right? And you asked the question about how does this feed the backlog, and I said, hey, figuring out the work necessary to change the product is what feeds the backlog. That work is what it gets in the backlog. I have a hypothesis. I don't know that changing my product or service in the way that I think it should be changed to meet the customer's needs, to meet their value demands, I don't know that's going to make me more money, right? I think it will, but I need to test it out. What I want to do is constant testing, constant experimentation, because I don't know the magic formula that's going to work. So I get this information in, I form a hypothesis. I believe that my customers value X. I currently have Y. If I change my product to deliver Z, then customers will see that it's closer to the X that they value, and they'll buy this many more products, and I'll make this much more money. So I form a hypothesis, right? Now, the beauty of forming this hypothesis, if we go back to our, go back to high school, I think most people took like a chemistry class or a physics class in high school, and they learned the scientific method, right? When you form a hypothesis, and the beauty of forming a hypothesis is that you can form a hypothesis test. which can prove or disprove your hypothesis. So, the tool I want to introduce this week is the customer hypothesis, right? You believe some things about your customers, and you believe that if you take certain actions, you're going to receive certain results. So you delineate this, you write it down into a hypothesis, and then you figure out, well, how do I test it out? Now, the key to this whole thing is the testing part. What people do incorrectly is that they form a hypothesis and they try to deliver the whole thing in order to test it out to see if it works. And the danger in that is if you're wrong, you spend all this time, all this money, all this energy doing the wrong thing, which a lot of us do, right? And so, what we want to do is slow it down. We form the customer hypothesis so that you can really study it, analyze, and see what's the smallest, easiest way for me to test this out without building the whole thing. What's the smallest amount I can do to test it out? Now, again, we do this in other aspects of our life. You're cooking something and you're trying out a new recipe. Before you build enough to feed an army, lots of times you'll do a small batch, a small portion, just so you can taste it and try it out. Maybe try it out with one or two close friends to see how much they like it before you make an army full for that dinner with all of your friends and family for the family reunion, right? And we want to apply the same logic to business. We want to say, form your customer hypothesis and then study it to figure out the easiest way, the least amount of time, effort, and energy you could spend to test it out. Test it out, see if it works. And if it works, then go ahead and do more of it. If it doesn't work, then you just try something else. You haven't lost that much. You scrap that idea and do something that you think will make money.
Does the customer hypothesis have a fill in the blank format to create it?
Yes, it does. Right? And there's many formats that you could use for the customer hypothesis. I'm going to show you my favorite format. And my favorite format, let me share my screen now. It's an easy format to look at and to remember. It contains three components: given, if, and then. Now, the given. A given is something that I'm assuming to be true. It's an assumption. So what I'm going to do in the given is I'm going to put down, here's what I believe. Now, what do I believe? I get my beliefs from talking to the customers. So here's what customers value, right? Here's who my customers should be. Maybe here's the place where they get their information, place where they frequent, right? So my given are things that I believe about either the customer or my product or service, what they value. So I start with that. Then the if statement. Earlier, what we talked about is when you're in a position where I've recognized that customers value X, I'm delivering Y. So there's a gap between what I'm delivering and what customers want. And you have to figure out how you're going to change your product or service in order to fill that gap to do more of what customers value. The if statement should indicate the change that you will make to make your product or service more valuable for the customers. So what are you going to do? That's what that if statement does. Now, the last part of the format is the then statement, whereas the given statement indicated here is the belief system I have. The then statement should indicate based upon the assumptions, the things I believe about the customers, about what they value. After I make this change, here's the results that I expect to see. So I'm forecasting consequences. I'm forecasting, hey, if I do this, then I should get these results. And now I can test it out because now I can start doing some things and I can look to see, am I starting to get closer to the results that I would expect to see? And if I get closer to those results, then I can reasonably assume, oh, I'm heading in the right direction. If I'm not getting closer to those results, then I can probably assume that I was wrong. And it could be that either I didn't do the if statement, the actions, the changes correctly, or it could be that my belief system about what people value, about who my customers are, where they frequent. It could be that those assumptions, those belief systems are incorrect. Either way, I need to make some other change in order to make more money. So again, the format for my customer hypothesis is this given if then format. What do you think about this?
I think that this is one of those things where you say, I can't believe I didn't know that already. Could you give us an example, perhaps carrying on your example of preparing a meal? Let's say you have a restaurant
Hmm.
and you're trying to introduce people are becoming more health conscious and they're looking for a healthy alternative to fast food.
Right.
Could you give us an example as if you were consulting with a restaurateur and helping them go through this process to introduce a new item to their menu?
Sure, sure. So let's go with our belief system first, our given, right? Our belief is that given customers desire a healthy alternative, right? So I'm going to start with that. And so I'm going to add an and here. And customers are willing to pay slightly more money for a healthy alternative, right? And I'm gonna make this smaller so we can see all of it in the screen. All right, there we go. So again, I'm testing out a couple of things here. I'm testing out, or I'm assuming that customers really want something healthy, and that they're willing to pay more for it. There's probably a third assumption I'm making, and again, we'll have to test this out to see if it's true. But the third assumption, for most instances, and the taste of the healthy alternative is close to the taste of the normal meal. And what we find normally is that people that are interested in these healthy alternatives, they're actually willing to sacrifice some of the taste in order to be healthy. Now, again, whatever you're serving can't be absolutely disgusting, but it doesn't have to be as good as the original meal, right? So those are the things that we believe about our customer base. And then I would ask that restaurateur, well, if these things are true, what are you going to do? What do you think you can change with the menu in order to produce something that they may like? And so the restaurateur may come back and say, hey, if I add a vegan substitute for an existing item, whoops, I didn't want to do that. So if I add this existing, this substitute for an existing item, and then I ask them, hey, what do you think is going to be the result? Right? So you add this thing to the menu that you didn't have before. What are you going to get out of it? What will customers do? And then have them forecast how they know if it worked or not. I should see additional customers choose the healthy alternative. I should see repeat business for it if they like it. I should see new customers obtaining recommendations from those who tried it. And so we got our statement here, and then we should introduce an item and test it out to see if you get the consequences, see if you get the results from that then statement. Do I see additional customers getting recommended from my my existing customer base?
Oh, your mic went out, Brian. You there?
Oh yeah, still here. The I was saying that if
I can't hear you. I see that you're in the meeting, but your microphone is not working. I'm gonna send you a message.
okay,
Oh, okay, you're back now.
okay, perfect. Sorry about that.
So,
The what I should, if I do this experiment correctly, the items that are in the then statement, I should be able to see those items manifest themselves if I carry out the action in the if statement. So I introduce this new item. I should see my existing customers, some of them choosing this new item, and I should see them choose it more than once, and I should see them recommending it to other people. So I should get new customers off of it if it worked. And if I don't, then maybe I didn't implement this correctly. But if I think I implemented it correctly, then the only thing that would make this not work is that these assumptions up top, they must not be true. Maybe customers aren't willing to pay more money for a healthy alternative. Maybe
so,
they don't want something close to the taste of a normal meal. Maybe they want something that's as good or better. Right? So you have to challenge those belief systems.
so are we going to do a sprint to test this out, or are we going to do something like a sprint, just in terms of having an amount of time and then having a team go through putting it forward?
Yeah. So what you want to do is do a sprint, or another word for a sprint is a time box. I want to run this experiment, but don't run the experiment forever. I want to have a short period of time that I think is sufficient to test this out and then look at the results. So could be that it takes me 2 weeks to come up with that menu item. Order some of the ingredients, add it to the menu, come up with the pricing for it, and actually start serving it. And maybe I think that a good test trial period is an additional 2 weeks. So maybe 2 weeks to actually go ahead and get the results. But again, I want to put a time box to it, right? What's a reasonable amount of time for me to validate whether or not this is true or whether it worked? So I put that time box together. I go ahead, do the experiment, and then talk to my customers, analyze the results, and then come up with a conclusion. Because ultimately, I need to decide. I only did a piece of this. Should I actually add this to the menu permanently? Or should I actually try a different alternative? Now, again, at a restaurant, a, half of the battle is seeing whether customers like the food, but the other half of the battle is making sure that we master, well, how do we get the supplies in at the cheapest cost? How do we actually make sure we optimize preparation and delivery of this item? So again, I want to see if they like it first, but then I may want to go back and optimize it. The whole process of
And
optimization is, when we actually not just get the revenue, but lower the cost for it, make it more accessible.
And so we want to test this thing slowly, one at a time, as opposed to investing a bunch of money to create a whole menu of alternative foods because we think people are going to eat it up.
Right.
And then if they don't, we've just lost all of that time and energy and resources in preparing a whole alternative menu that we thought that they wanted, but in actuality, they did not.
You got it. Because again, once you investing in a whole menu is a lot of time, it's a lot of energy, it's a lot of money, and buying the supplies, changing your supply chain to make sure that you stock the right ingredients for all these things, training your staff to cook, to serve, editing your menu. It's a lot of effort in there. And if it's an idea that isn't working, it's not for your customer base, it won't make you more money, then better for you to find out with one item rather than spend all the time, the energy, the money on a whole menu and then find out it doesn't work.
And so what I'm hearing is incremental. You know, the increment is important because what we tend to do is we try to come up with the whole shebang.
Hmm.
And if we did increments, it could prevent us. You use some language, and I get it. I don't know the language you use, but basically, you prevent yourself from having losses that come from putting out the whole shebang at once because that's what you think people want.
Right.
And you said, I forget the numbers you said, but you might have said something like 75% of the things that are made are not used.
Absolutely. Like there's a famous study that was done, and that study was published in what we call the by the Standards Group, and what they published as the Chaos Report. And it looked at what is the percentage of features for products and services that are either never used or rarely used. And what they found out is that close to 50% are rarely or never used, and pretty much another 25% are like seldom used or no, they're used infrequently. But there's only about 12 to 25% that are always or often used by customers. And you want to spend your money on where you get the value, the things that are always or often in demand. And so if you can experiment and figure out, look, here's the portion that fits into that 75% category that's never used, that is rarely used, that is used infrequently. If I can figure this out by using the least amount of time, effort, and money possible, then my my chances of actually making more money, of not wasting my resources, go up dramatically. So we want to
Oh,
actually make this more scientific approach to business.
okay, I like you to say something for the sake of the recording.
Hmm.
Could you say something like, something like, since only 25% of what people create are actually used, we want to make sure that you're putting your efforts into that 25% that is used and not the 75% that isn't. And to do that, we use this process of blah, blah, blah.
And you absolutely nailed it, right? And when I say you nailed it, the thing is, since the studies show that 95% of all products and services fail in the marketplace. It's a Harvard study that shows this 95% of all products and services fail, right? And we want to actually increase your chances of being successful. And so, what we want to do is not do things haphazardly, not go all in when the chances are the things that you're going to go all in on will fail, right? If 95% of the products fail, the likelihood is that the ideas that you may have may be failure ideas. Even though you think that it's the best idea in the world, so the other 94% of the people who have products that fail, they all thought that their idea was going to be successful too. So what we want to do in order to avoid that failure is really focus our time, attention, our energy on the things that are most likely to be successful. And when we looked at the chaos report that talked about how most of the products and features that we put out, that we spend our time, we spend our energy on, since most of those products and features, a good 75% of them are not frequently used by customers, which means customers don't value them that much. What we want to do is identify those characteristics that they do value, the ones that they always want, the ones that they frequently use, the ones they're going to talk about. And we want to spend our time and energy focusing on those because if customers value them, the ultimate test of what you value is where you put your money. So we want to spend our time and energy and increase our likelihood, increase our chances of producing the things that customers value the most that they'll put more money into. And what this process does, this whole customer hypothesis, is allow you to scientifically look at where do customers value things the most. And let's test it out with as little resources as possible to figure out what they value, figure out what they're going to pay the most money for before we invest too much money in areas that are likely going to be unprofitable, that they don't value, that they won't pay money for. And we should continue this process on a continual basis over and over again to make sure we're always focusing our attention, experimenting on what's going to make us the most amount of money. That's what we want to do with this process. What do you think about this?
I think that what you're doing here, man, is you are almost uh, assuring that people are going to start being successful in their business endeavors, man. It's almost just like just follow the process, and it's almost certain success. It's unbelievable. It's
Yeah,
unbelievable, especially to think about all the businesses that people have tried and they haven't been able to succeed because we kind of have the idea that if we build it, they will come.
right.
And that doesn't happen. That's not the reality.
Yeah,
But
especially not in our
if
community.
not in our community, but if people would have been, I think you called it hyper focused on the customer.
Hmm.
And if we had these tools and strategies to make sure that we are basically providing what people want to buy. I tell you, man, honestly, it makes me want to just start a bunch of businesses. Just see what people want and give it to them. This is going to turn me into a businessman.
But I'll tell you one thing that I had to really focus on in my business is to make sure that I don't delegate this responsibility because it's too important. Most of my employees will talk about this and they'll talk to customers, but it's hard for them to be insanely focused on the customers. And so I found that as the head of my company, I needed to go into the trenches myself. I needed to talk to the customers, hear firsthand, here are the things they value, here are the things they don't value, so that I could continuously form hypotheses and continuously test things out. Too often,
Now,
we want to believe our own hype. We want to believe that we're great, so we don't test things out.
and also, I don't think we know how. It's almost like it seems to be common sense, but a lot of times, man, if people don't tell you certain things, you just don't know it. They don't come into your awareness.
Right.
I mean, everything I was involved in, why didn't we test out what it's ego, man. It's ego.
And it really
It's
is. We don't want to admit it, we will explain it away as passion. We'll explain it away as we know we're right. We'll blame the customers. We'll blame coworkers and subordinates. But it boils down to ego. You're absolutely right.
Yeah,
We
people think because of their because of their paper on the wall, therefore they know.
but this whole process, it requires a great deal of humility. The underlying assumption that you have to use with this process is that although you think you know what customers want, if your product or service isn't flying off the shelf, you don't really know. You're wrong. Because if you knew what customers really wanted and you were really delivering it, your product or service will be flying off the shelf. You will be rolling in money. So it's a humbling experience. You have to really be humble to take the opposite assumption that you don't know. And it's difficult not only for the person in charge, but for other people in the company. We all like the person who has this confidence that surety that they know where they're going. Right? People find that very attractive and they'll follow that type of leader. But the truth of the matter is, you don't know. Again, I'm in Silicon Valley with these billion-dollar companies, and if you could see the busloads of people that Apple brings in to test out their products and get their feedback, you know, people always bring up this Apple example of how, Steve Jobs told people, "Hey, you know what? Customers don't really know what they want, so I figure it out for them." And it's all a myth, right? I live 17 minutes from Apple. My wife has been called into Apple to give her feedback on Apple Health many times. We've got probably three laptops, three iPads that she received as gifts for giving her feedback. They bring in people by the busloads to make sure that they get real information about here's what our customers really want and here's what they like. And so I don't want, you got to be humble about it. The biggest companies in the world, they're actually doing the research because they're willing to admit without asking people what they want, they wouldn't know. If we want that money, we have to be willing to be as humble. You don't have to you can be like Apple. You don't have to admit it out loud. Right? You can keep it under wraps and keep the mystery. Act like you're a genius, but do what they do and constantly seek the feedback. Go through this process, actually ask people so that you can actually figure out here's what they really do want and then go from there.
I think we need to do a piece on that. I never went through life coaching, so I don't know what it is, but this does it. It just feels like this is so much more than business, man. This is can be applied to your whole life. But one thing I would like us to do is create a, I don't know what to call it, but I think we just need to, in preparing people to take advantage of what we're giving them, we need to put it up front, these potential impediments that deal with ego. What are the things that, okay, if I'm a business owner and I'm coming to you for a consultation,
Hmm.
what are the things that will stop me from following your direction and being successful?
Right.
Specifically, the ego and the need for the humility and all these type of things. I think we need to put that on a piece of paper so that a person can look at it, and then they have to realize that your degrees and accomplishments does not mean you automatically know everything people want without asking them. And people have to face that.
Right. Yeah, and the funny thing is that, you know, I like to I like to believe that I know what my wife wants, but I don't know how many times I bought the wrong anniversary gift. And she's been disappointed, you know. She wants a special night out, and I picked the wrong restaurant, and she didn't have a special night. And if I can't pick out the right thing for someone I'm married to and I've known
Mm,
for a couple decades, then it's
wow.
then what makes you think that you can pick out the exact right thing for thousands, sometimes millions of strangers that you've never even met? You know, when you put it in that perspective, it's really sort of incredible that we would think that we could figure out what other people want without doing this type of research. And so,
That is a powerful. I don't know what the proper name for it, but that example you just gave, man, that's eye opening, and we
yeah,
need that. We need to hear that because I don't know if we call it the anniversary fiasco or whatever, but just the concept of your spouse. You might if you go shopping for your spouse, there's a chance they might be dissatisfied
right,
if you don't ask them what they want. And that story is so relatable, and then it allows you to reflect on how that applies to more than just your spouse.
right. No, and I'm humble enough to admit that I'm terrible at picking out gifts. And now that I have a daughter, you know, I have no shame in my game about having my daughter, "Hey, go ask mommy what she would like as a gift." Having her test it out and come back and report to daddy, right? And then I just go get that, right? Because we don't
So
know,
you don't
right?
know. You got to find a way to ask.
That's right. And so, yeah, that this whole process of coming up with the hypothesis, testing it out, and then rehashing it. When I say rehashing it, I form a conclusion and then repeat the process over and over again. This is the true work that's involved with running a business. People think that the true work is more about the operational side, hurrying up, doing more hours, putting more work into it. But the true work is this, which is the essence of strategy. I want to make the right assumptions, identify the right value for the right customers. Figuring that part out, going in the right direction, it's much more beneficial, much more profitable than actually trying to implement things more efficiently. Because if you're implementing the wrong thing more efficiently, you could just get better at losing money.
Wow.
Much
That,
better for you to figure out what the right thing is to do, what customers really value. And you could do that inefficiently and still make money. That's what you want.
this is crazy, Brian. This is crazy. I can see it, man. I know that sometimes people don't have a vision, they can't see it. I don't know why they can't see it, but a lot of people can't see it, man.
Yeah,
But I can see how, like, this information, this is the first time in my life where I really had a feeling that knowledge in itself was power. You know what I'm saying? This stuff that you got, man, like, for a business person to learn these things, it's a transform their whole business and life.
right.
And if we can focus that like a magnifying glass on our community, man, like, you could be the catalyst to like completely transform your whole ethnic group. That is crazy, man.
But that's one of the main focus areas for the Black Valley podcast is just to get this information out to the people because
Wow.
other people, again, I'm in Silicon Valley and I see this happening with other businesses on a constant basis. And so we
Oh
just
my
want to make sure
gosh.
that, you know, smaller businesses can take care, use the same techniques that these large companies are using to make billions. You can use it to you don't have to make billions, right? But you can use it to make millions and be happy, right?
So if we were to say that our people from our community, they need to get into this vein of thought, what would the name of that vein be?
So I'm a huge fan of an approach to new product development called Agile.
Okay.
And lots of people in our community have never heard of the term Agile. But again, Agile is this approach to new product development that really focuses on some core values. One of those core values is that individuals and their interactions is more important than a process or a tool that you use. Another core value is that the working product, something that's actually produced as real that you can demo for a customer, is more important than documentation. One of the values is that, and this is the kicker, that negotiation with your customers is more important than a contract. In our community, when we do business together, the first thing people want to do is form a contract. And it's like, hey, what we ought to do is form a relationship from service or the customer. Let me make sure I understand what you want more than anything else. And then finally, one of the core values is making sure that we prioritize responding to change, responding to needs over following a set plan. And so this whole agile approach is based upon these values of putting the customer first, testing things out by seeing what's really working, you know, figuring out how we interact better and change, not doing the same thing over and over again, but changing constantly so we can improve. Agile is where it's at.
So we could say that what you are doing is introducing us to the agile approach to business.
That's correct. That's correct. And even though we haven't heard of it, you know, if we if we put in Google or go to Chat GPT and put in Agile, you'll see that businesses have been using it to make a ton of money for decades. That this approach is, it's in a Harvard Business Review. There's at least a few articles on it every year because it's so important to the effects it has on business. The people that are making money are using this approach.
Okay, so maybe what we can do in each episode, perhaps we could highlight one principle from the Agile Manifesto that's important.
Yeah, and actually, here's the funny thing. What I've been focusing on is the third value of customer negotiation.
Mhm.
I've been highlighting that for all the episodes so far.
Okay,
They've all been based on the customer.
okay.
So
This is
this,
good, man.
but this
Like
might
I
be a good jumping off point to kind of end the episode.
okay. Oh yeah, I forgot we still recording, man. I'm
That's
over
right.
here. I'm getting emotional, man. I'm over here getting emotional.
So what we'll do is we'll wrap up again. today what we focused on was the customer hypothesis, and when we did it, what we did was we thought about what are the beliefs we have about either the customer, what they value, where they frequent, how to reach them. You know, what do we believe? What is our belief system? What are our assumptions about the customer? And then we said, well, given our assumptions, what do we want to change in our product or service to actually get closer to what they value or where they're at and who they are, what's important to them? And if we do make that change, what are the results that we would expect to see? What's the proof? What's the evidence that lets us know that we were correct, that execute it effectively? So we create this customer hypothesis. And again, I had the template up on the screen, this given if then format. And again, we want to write this down. And the reason we want to write it down is because we're going to test our hypothesis out. We're going to spend a certain amount of time in a sprint or a time box where we'll implement some of that idea, not the whole thing, just a piece of it because it's an experiment. So we'll do a piece of it, see if we start getting closer to our results. And if we do, we can do more of it. But if we don't, then we should pivot and do something else. So that's the customer hypothesis. In our next episode, what we'll do is we'll apply the customer hypothesis to the levitation music company that we've been using in the previous episodes. And we'll actually see what are some of the things that they are hypothesizing about their customers. And then in a further episode, we'll figure out, well, how do you experiment? How do you test it? Until then, we thank you all for your time and attention. And we will end our recording here. We'll see you next time.